welcome to a series called History Talk. I chose that name because I rolled a die and it happened to land on that.
Alright, yeah, sounds like a good name.
Now then, for the next 6 or so episodes, I shall be talking about review for the AP World History 2017 to 2018 sort of textbook thing, or curriculum thing. I don't know, I figure I should date it so that way if anything changes in the near future, because historians actually figure something out, that's going to be useful to know. So first off, we're talking about Period 1, defined by the AP Institute at this point as prehistory to 600 BCE. Prehistory, for those who don't know, is before we mentioned the big picture for Period 1 is technological and environmental transformations. Just that's the big picture. That's what you really need to know for this AP exam. Next up, key concept. The big thing that happened, so some of the big things that happened were Paleolithic migrations from East Africa to Eurasia and Australia and the Americas. Ugh, I could have said that so much better. This is going to be a fun edit. Because humans were constantly moving over the course of quite a long period of time, they eventually created different types of adaptive technology, or really they adapted to environments and then adapted their own technology to benefit those environments. They were basically just organized at this point in egalitarian hunter and gatherer bands. So there was no real difference in gender roles. The women were still the women were sort of like the gatherers and the men were the hunters. Very early trade between kinship groups. It wasn't widespread, but not every kinship group was self-sustaining. They did need to trade to some small degree. It wasn't a lot. And now we get to key concept 2, and you get to see the fact that the AP Institute just jumps around a lot, because now we immediately jump to the Neolithic Revolution and early agricultural societies. So, this is the interesting part, and this occurred 10,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age, when, the world started to warm up a little bit and we could actually farm. So this created a more reliable but less diverse food supply, and so, humans' population could explode. And another part of this agriculture was the use of domesticated animals. You see cows and sheep and pigs and stuff, all being domesticated so we get food. Sorry, vegans, but that's how it worked. That's how you got to this point. Let's see, what else? Patriarchy and forced labor systems also. Was that the Tumblr trigger alarm? Yes, that's right, I said patriarchy. It's been around for 10,000 years. No further comments, that's just the fact. Let's see, what else? Pastoralism emerged in parts of Europe and Asia. At this point, I believe Europe doesn't become interesting until around time period 3. So, Europe is just hunter-gatherers for most of the time. Not a lot of stuff was going on in Europe. Most places in Asia were pretty boring, except for China. There's some pretty interesting stuff going on there, until time period 3, which has the Mongols. So we'll get into that later. Pastoralists were an important conduit for technological change, because they were constantly moving and sort of just finding new grazing lands for their herds. They have figured out and created some different things that everyone kind of wanted. Important places of agricultural emergence were Mesopotamia, the Nile River Valley, Sub-Saharan Africa, Indus River Valley, Yellow River Valley, Papua New Guinea, Mesoamerica, and the Andes. These are the really key places you want to keep in mind for this AP exam. And I will have a map overlay sort of going over most of the time I talk about locations, so you can sort of see where all these take place on the world map. I highly recommend you draw it out for yourself as well. Then there are 5 big technologies that really encompass this entire time period and are really important to fundamentally understanding everything. They are pottery, plows, woven textiles, wheels, and metallurgy. Those are the 5 you need to know. It's going to be on the exam. So now we go to Key Concept 3, Technological and Environmental Transformations. So about 5,000 years ago, urban societies developed, and the first civilizations sort of emerged. I shorten that to civs, so whenever I reference a civ, I mean civilization. That's sort of from playing a game called Civilization 5. Anyways, so these civilizations had political bureaucracies, armies, religious hierarchies, social hierarchies, and long-distance trade. They also had specialization of labor, competition for surplus resources, war, complex systems of government and religion, violence-driving developments of new technologies. You know, humanity. Just being humanity. It was really at this point. And these core civs were Mesopotamia. There's a lot of city-states within Mesopotamia, but the AP Institute, or whatever my curriculum is, just defines it as Mesopotamia. There's Egypt, you want to know Egypt. There's Mohenjo-Daro, which is in the Indus Valley. There's the Shang dynasty of China. There are the Olmecs in Mesoamerica, and the Chavin in the Andes. The Andes are in a mountain range in South America, I believe. So, and some important civs in Mesopotamia are the Hittites and the Babylonians. Important thing to note is that the Hittites had iron. They're sort of like the metal guys in this entire Fertile Crescent world. I'm going to get back to the Hittites slightly later. So anyways, another thing, record-keeping systems. They want you to know these: cuneiform, hieroglyphs, pictographs, and Chipu. I'll have a sort of note as to where those are. They should be right next to me. Okay, just keep that in mind. Supplementary information right next to me. Weapons and modes of transportation: compound bow, iron weapons, chariots, and horseback riding. Those are the things sort of spread by the pastoralists. I believe I mentioned that prior, just reiterating. I don't think iron weapons was spread, but everything else, yes. Monumental architecture and urban planning. There was the ziggurats, the pyramids, temples. There was the ziggurats, sewage and water systems, and let's see. Oh yes, legal systems. Code of Hammurabi. That's the really big one that everyone should know at this point. You know, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Let's see what else. There are religions. There's the Vedic religions, which would eventually become Hinduism, Hebrew monotheism, which would eventually become Judaism, and Zoroastrianism from Persia. Or really what the Western world knows as Persia. It's basically been known as Iran internally for most of its own history. It's important to note as well that Hinduism and Judaism did not form until the Vedic religions and Hebrew monotheism, respectively, codified their own religions with a sort of book. So basically, they're completely separate. You can think of them, oh, Hebrew monotheism, yeah, that's going to become Judaism, but at this point in time, it is not yet Judaism. Sort of important to know. Major trade routes. There's 2 in particular that you need to know for this time period. There's the trade route along the Nile between Egypt and Nubia, and there is the trade between the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia. Important works of literature. There's the Epics of Gilgamesh, the Rig Veda, which I've only seen references to. I have not actually seen or even talked about in class, so I'm going to have to do a bit more independent research on that one. It seems kind of interesting, although I do assume that it's got something to do with the Vedic religions. And the Book of the Dead, which is, you know, Egypt. Anyone who's read Rick Riordan's stuff knows, oh, Egypt! You're probably going to be good in mythology if you've read any of those books. So there are some things overlooked by AP textbook and curriculum, but I feel they're useful to know because there are essay portions. I believe it is the LEQ, where you have to sort of go off of some of your own knowledge as well to fill up some space. So the Bronze Age and major civilizations, if you notice, I completely skipped over that because the AP Institute completely skips over the Bronze Age and goes right into the Iron Age. That's why they said the Hittites had iron. They did. They just had it in the Iron Age, not the Bronze Age. So, it's the major civilizations of the Bronze Age were Egypt, the Mycenaeans, who were sort of the Proto-Greeks, the Hittites, yeah, they're still around, and the Assyrians, who were in Mesopotamia. And so bronze is an alloy of copper and tin. It is not its own element, it's an alloy. And the Hittites controlled the only source of tin in the entire region at the time. Basically, you know how rare uranium is? Tin is about as rare as that. So there's a lot of tin production in Europe, last I saw a map of it, and the Hittites sort of controlled trade to that area to some degree, but they did have at least one major tin production facility within their territory, like what we'd normally consider the Fertile Crescent where they were. So they were basically the only people with tin, and so the entire Bronze Age world had this really interconnected trade system that we were able to discover. Um, the problem with talking about the Bronze Age is that there's one thing that everyone knows. It collapsed so thoroughly that we have very little information on it. Like, after all these civilizations collapsed, writing just disappeared for a while until it was eventually picked back up, and civilizations moved like away from the sea and were found further in mountains and weren't really made of permanent materials. And it's really interesting to look into. There is this one series that Extra History did, if you just note that's one of my favorite history series on the internet, that went over sort of the Bronze Age collapse, and I find it fascinating to at least learn about, because it does make some good filler for an LEQ. So, yeah, that is all I have for Period 1. I hope you enjoyed it to some degree. I hope this helps you to study. It certainly helped me to study because I had to go over this a couple times.